While people are still joining us, I want to get started because we want to give Marion as much time as possible. My name is Bob Lawrence. I'm the director of the Center for a Livable Future, and it's a pleasure to welcome all of you here in Sheldon Hall, as well as all of you who are tuning in on the streaming webcast to this 10th annual Dodge Lectureship. I want to begin by recognizing our good friend Ed Dodge. Ed, please stand. We can thank you very much, Ed. Ed is an alumnus of the School of Public Health, back when it was called the School of Hygiene and Public Health. And Ed was one of the first alumni who really liked what the Center for a Livable Future was trying to do. And he and his wife, Carol, endowed the Dodge Lectureship in honor of Ed and his first wife, Nancy. And this endowed lectureship now has allowed us to bring distinguished visitors to the school, and Marion Nestle is the 10th Dodge lecturer. Marion is a good friend to a number of us in the audience, and her bio is in the program that was handed out, so I'm not going to read through the entire bio. In fact, the title slide allows me to skip over the wonderful books that Marion has published and have been important in getting the message out about what good nutrition really means for public health. Some of you coming in today may have noticed the oil portrait opposite the entrance to Sheldon Hall, E.B. McCollum. How many of you have seen the E.B. McCollum portrait? Okay, those of you who haven't, on your way out, just pause for a moment. E.B. McCollum was the first professor of biochemistry here at the school in 1916 or 1917. Like Marion Nestle, he was a distinguished scientist. He discovered vitamins A and D. And like Marion, he did not let it stay in the laboratory. He wrote a monthly column in McCall's magazine for a number of years that communicated sound nutrition science to the general public. And it is that role that Marion has played so effectively for all of us. When you think of people like Alice Walters, Michael Pollan, Barbara Kingsolver, they, like Marion, write wonderful books. They come, however, from journalism, from being an excellent chef, from being a novelist and a writer. And then when you think of people like Kelly Brownell at Yale and Brian Wainsick at Cornell, then you begin to have the kind of company that Marion also belongs to. So she's one of these unique people that takes science, nutrition, and a wonderful ability to communicate to the public and puts it all together. I first met Marion back between her periods in academia. She had been an associate dean of the School of Medicine at UCSF. And then in 1986, she moved to Washington to the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion and worked closely with Michael McGinnis and was a special advisor to the Department of Health and Human Services and edited the 1988 Surgeon General's report on nutrition and health. I was there intermittently as chair of the first U.S. Preventive Services Task Force. And we were doing evidence-based reviews of the clinical preventive services that physicians, nurses, social workers, dentists, nutritionists would communicate to patients in a one-on-one situation. We struggled with how to define the role of nutrition, advocacy, and education. And at that point, there was precious little in the published peer-reviewed literature indicating that a doctor telling a patient how to eat made any sense. part of the reason is none of us had been educated about nutrition in medical school, but part of it was that the nutrition science was still building. But Marion was the person who guided us and who directed us to the then existent peer review literature and the chapters that we were able to include in the first guide to clinical preventive services. Owe an enormous debt to her insight and her consultation. Most recently, Marion has served as a commissioner on the Pew Commission on Industrial Farm Animal Production, which was housed here at the school with a grant from the Pew Charitable Trust. And Marion brought her same combination of insightful scientific thinking to her ability to understand what kind of messages were important to communicate that science to the general public. So Marion, it is really a great pleasure to welcome you to the Bloomberg School of Public Health to give the 10th Dodge Lecture.
Thank you, Bob, for that very, very nice introduction, and thank you, Mr. Dodge, for the great honor of being able to give a lecture in your honor, and thank all of you for coming today on a beautiful, beautiful day when we would all be better outside. I'm going to, the title of my talk is, makes an assumption that there is a food revolution going on, and I do believe that there is one. And there are signs of it everywhere, sometimes even as at high level as the White House. And Michelle Obama in February announced her anti-childhood obesity campaign, and which I think is a very, very important leadership initiative. And I particularly liked that campaign, which is focused on schools and in inner city access to healthy food, because my own work deals with food systems. And by food systems, I mean the connection between production and consumption of food, agriculture, food, nutrition, and public health. The two areas of public health that I've been most interested in are obesity and food safety, which seem like they're not particularly related, but you can't ask people to eat healthfully if the food they're eating isn't safe. And my books over the last 10 years have, 2 of them have dealt with obesity and 2 of them have dealt with food safety, all from the political point of view. And I used to think that when I first started out in nutrition, I thought that agriculture didn't have anything to do with public health. And it took me a long time to catch on that you can't really understand why people eat the way they do unless you understand how our agricultural system works. And I'll be talking a little bit about that. But first, a commercial. This is my book that's coming out next week. We're very excited about it. I won't say anything more about it, but look for it. The first book that got any public attention was Food Politics, which came out in a first edition in 2002 and a second edition in 2007. And I've just been astounded by what has happened in the intervening 5 years. In 2002, mainstream media were talking about how childhood obesity was a familial and a personal responsibility. 5 years later, they're talking about how it's a matter of lifestyle and how the environment influences what people eat. And I'd like to think that food politics had something to do with that. But whatever. The reason was it's happening, and I think it's created a very, very big difference in the way we talk about this, and it's very much part of the revolution. Now, I want to just do a little background material on how obesity became a problem, because in order to understand the way if we're having a revolution, we have to know what we're revolting against. And in order to talk about that, it's necessary really to understand how obesity started to happen. We can date the onset of America's obesity problem quite precisely in the early 1980s. Prior to then, the rate stayed about the same. In the early 1980s, they started to go up. So you ask the question, what happened in the early 1980s? And I think there were 3 things. The first was the deregulatory environment of the Reagan administration, which took the caps off a lot of controls on spending on things like marketing to children. The second was, I think, even more important, and that was a change in the way we regulated farm policy, the way we subsidized farmers. Prior to the mid-1970s, farmers were subsidized for not growing food. Beginning in the 1970s, they were paid to grow as much food as possible, and the result of that was mountains of corn in a sea of farm subsidies, and that had two very profound effects. One was that it raised the number of calories available in the food supply from what had been an average of 3,200 calories per person per day for decades to the present 3,900 calories a day. Now, this isn't what people are actually eating. It's what's available in the food supply, less exports plus imports. But even if a great deal of those calories are wasted, as the Department of Agriculture maintains, it's still an average, roughly twice what the average food intake is needed by the population. And what this does is make the food industry very competitive. If they want to sell food, they're selling food in an environment in which there are twice as many calories available as anybody possibly needs. But that's not all. The other thing that changed in the early 1980s was the way in which Wall Street evaluates food corporations. Prior to the early 1980s, Wall Street evaluated food corporations on the basis of long, slow returns, steady returns on investment, blue chip stocks. You never hear anything about blue chip stocks anymore because starting in the early 1980s was the advent of the shareholder value movement that insisted that corporations produce higher returns on investment right now. And we see the result of that on Wall Street at this very moment. But it was particularly difficult for food companies who were already trying to sell food in an overly competitive environment. Now they not only had to make a profit, but they had to grow their profit every 90 days. And the result of that was that food companies sought new ways to sell food. And those ways created a food environment that encouraged people to eat more calories than they had in previous years. So one way was that because food was cheap, supply and demand, people began eating out more. Food outside the home has more calories than food prepared inside the home, and a lot of that can be accounted for by fast food. People ate out more, they ate more calories. A second thing was the introduction of larger sized portions into the food supply. If I had one thing that I could teach the American public, it would be that larger portions have more calories. Let me tell you, it's not intuitively obvious, and the work of Brian Wansink demonstrates beautifully that it's not intuitively obvious. Even his own trained students eat more when given larger portions of food. Another was ubiquity. I like to ask the question, when did it become okay to eat in bookstores? I can assure you it's since the 1980s. And then proximity is another. If you're a food company and you want kids in school to eat a lot of food, you get as many vending machines in those schools as you possibly can, because the research shows that the more vending machines there are, the more kids will buy foods from them. And that's what the fight is over vending machines. The last is low prices. It's very hard to argue against low prices for food, and I'm not going to. I'm just going to point out that the way our agricultural system works is that if you go into McDonald's with $5, you've got two choices. You can buy 5 hamburgers or 1 salad. Now, if you're a poor person with a family, which choice are you going to make? And to me, the big question here is, how come? Why is a salad 1/5 the cost of a hamburger? A lot of that has to do with agricultural subsidies and the way they're deployed. It also has to do with other kinds of policies. And if you look at the change in relative prices from the early 1980s to the present time, you can see that the relative cost of fresh food has increased by about 40%, whereas the relative cost of beer, butter, and sodas has gone down by 20 to 40%. Again, this has to do with the way in which we subsidize corporations and the way in which we subsidize agriculture. So all in all, this creates an environment in the United States in which people are encouraged to eat more food than they need or really want. And it's not that food corporations are sitting around a conference table saying, how can we make Americans fat? They're sitting around a conference table saying, how can we sell our food in an extraordinarily competitive food environment? Now, this was the kind of thing that Michelle Simon talked about in her book, Appetite for Profit, that came out a few years ago, in which she explained the extraordinary pressures that are on food companies, from advocates like me, from regulators that are dying to sue them, from lawyers who are dying to sue them, from regulators who want to regulate them, but mostly from Wall Street, which simply wants food corporations to make more money all the time. And food companies at first went through all the stages of death and denial and did nothing and just denied that they had any responsibility for obesity at all. And then they began to fight back. And I'm not going to say very much about the fighting back. I'm not going to talk about lobbying, their attacks on advocates. I have a website, foodpolitics.com. I post all their letters on that website. You can go read them. They blame inactivity and they blame personal choice, but I do want to talk about the way in which they form partnerships and alliances with people who ought to be advocates for a healthier food system. And I also want to talk about the way they're changing products, because this is what you experience when you go to a supermarket, and these and the issues of health claims, functional foods, and self-endorsements are very much in play right now and are worth taking a look at. So let me start with health claims. We didn't have health claims on food products until 1984. The FDA said if a food package was going to have a health claim on it, it was advertising itself as a drug. If it was going to behave like a drug, it had to be treated like a drug and needed to prove that it worked through clinical trials. And if you just give a moment's thought to what a clinical trial of all brand cereal might be like, you know that it's only one food product and it's probably not going to show very much. But in 1984, Kellogg's did an end run around the FDA and made a private deal with the National Cancer Institute to put a health claim for fiber and cancer on all brand cereals. And the immediate result was almost 50% increase in sales over the next few months. So the word was out that health claims sold food products. Kellogg's was very busy during these years trying to get health claims on food products, and the following year it submitted a 400-page petition to the FDA arguing for health claims. And the particular action that it requested, when I just ran across this volume in my library of all things, and I was amazed to read the action that required, because I had seen that language before, the language requesting health claims. And the place where I saw almost word-for-word language was in the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act of 1990, which forced the FDA to allow health claims on food products. The argument was that if the Congress was going to force food companies to have a nutrition facts label, then food companies ought to be able to say what was good about their products, and Congress agreed and forced the FDA to start allowing health claims on food products. And there were two kinds of claims that were allowed by that. Nutrient content claims, which proclaim the value of the nutrients on products like these, and excuse me, health claims, which are statements about the ability of the product to reduce the risk of heart disease or cancer or whatever. And again, the clinical trial issue comes up. But the FDA was to allow these kinds of claims provided that there was some scientific substantiation. And that's where these kinds of claims came from. Congress, in its infinite wisdom, passed the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994, which allowed a third category of claims, structure function claims, which are claims that foods could support a structure or function of the body. And that was when we got St. John's wort supplemented tortilla chips. And ginkgo cereals for sharp thinking. Now, the Dietary Supplement Act did not apply to food products. It only applied to supplements. But food companies said that's not fair. If supplements can do it, we should be able to do it too. And they began producing products like this. The FDA said, sorry, don't apply to food. And these products have all disappeared for the most part. And then a fourth kind of health claim started in 1990 with, of all things, the American Heart Association, which dreamed up a scheme for a heart check as a money-raising proposition for the association. And at first, in 1990, they wanted to charge a lot of money, but there were too many complaints about it. So in 1994, they came back with a program that didn't charge companies nearly as much, but it generates millions of dollars each year for the American Heart Association. And so the American Heart Association logo is on a lot of sugary cereals and sometimes some salty products, because mostly it only cares about saturated fat and cholesterol. So that's the background of that. Whenever the FDA turned down a claim because there wasn't enough scientific substantiation, the companies took the FDA to court, and the courts ruled in favor of the companies on the grounds of commercial free speech. The FDA, after losing 80% of the cases, this is during the Bush administration now, just decided to roll over and play dead on this question of health claims. And the result was what you see in supermarkets right now. Now, I have to say something about the First Amendment decisions, because my understanding of the First Amendment was that it was designed for freedom of political and religious speech. And it never occurred to me that the Founding Fathers, when they designed the First Amendment, were thinking about the right of corporations to market junk foods to children. But that seems to be the way the courts have interpreted it, and we now have a Supreme Court that's very unlikely to change any of those decisions. So expect more fights there. The FDA has just hired a legal team that it is expecting to help the FDA do what it wants to do, and so I have some hope that this will change. But the result of all of this is that products in the supermarket have many kinds of health claims on them, and this is a completely typical cereal with 6 different kinds of claims. It has these little guideline daily amounts. It'll make you smart. It'll make your heart healthy. Doesn't have any trans fat. It'll lower both blood pressure and cholesterol, and it has an endorsement from the American Heart Association, even though sugars appear 9 times in the ingredient list. Now, that's health claims. One result of health claims is functional foods, because if you have health claims and you can put something in a food product that makes it look healthy, you can make a health claim for it. And functional foods are foods that have something added to them above and beyond what's in the general food, and these are the major types of health claims that are used in functional foods. And they raise the question, is this about health or is it about marketing? Well, it's certainly about marketing, because almost the only area of growth in the food industry besides organics, is in the functional food range. Consumers love buying these things because they think they're healthy. So the real question is, what's the science behind these? And here the science is unfortunately very iffy, and the more carefully the science is done, the less it shows. So for this Smart Start antioxidant cereal, if you look at the evidence on antioxidants and prevention of cancer or heart disease, or any of the other major conditions, the evidence routinely shows no effect. Very, very disappointing, all of that. But it still sells food products. Now, and that doesn't stop, the science doesn't stop anybody from making these products. And in 2008, we had just a flood of products that were fortified with omega-3 fatty acids, eggs and milk and peanut butter and mayonnaise, and even Oreo-type cookies. And here, too, the science is very iffy, and the European Food Safety Agency, which has been dealing with thousands of requests for health claims in Europe, has come up with decision after decision after decision that they're not going to allow health claims for probiotics or omega-3s because the evidence just isn't there. And what if you don't have evidence? How about an implied health claim? And this was a cereal I picked up in a supermarket just a couple of weeks ago. It's a blueberry pomegranate cereal, and everybody knows that blueberries and pomegranates are superfoods, right? The only problem with this cereal is it doesn't have any blueberries or pomegranates in it. I searched the ingredient list. It doesn't have any trace of either of these fruits. What it does have is artificial and natural flavors, but nevertheless, it's advertised as helping to support your natural defenses and 100% of your daily nutrition. So that brings me to the whole question of self-endorsements. I love self-endorsements. Self-endorsements are where you set up your own criteria. I mean, the American Heart Association did this first, but PepsiCo followed in the early 2000s, and PepsiCo set up its own nutritional criteria for evaluating its own food products, and lo and behold, hundreds of its food products qualified for it's Smart Spot. These are Canadian products, but you get the general idea, and they put this green spot on. And if you asked PepsiCo officials, as I did, how come you're marketing this stuff as health foods? They said, we're not. We're just marketing them as better choices. So they were not the only ones to do this. Kraft did exactly the same thing with its Sensible solution. And by the late early 2000s, 2007, 2008, practically every major food company had its own front of package designation, designating its healthier for you products. Now, you might ask the question, what happens if independent scientists set up these criteria? And that experiment actually was done at Hannaford supermarkets in the Northeast, in which they got a group of independent nutritionists to set up across-the-board criteria for the product. The idea was that they would put 1, 2, or 3 stars on products in the supermarket that met the criteria. If they met them a lot, they would get 3 stars and so forth. And when they applied, they were dismayed to discover that when they applied those criteria to 27,500 products in Hannaford supermarkets, only 24% qualified for even 1 star. And of that 24%, a very large percentage were fruits and vegetables in the produce section. So there's a lot of junk food out there, really a lot. So then the question is, well, how are you going to help consumers distinguish between one junk food and another? And this subject came up in the United Kingdom, which is a little bit ahead of us on all of this. And there were 2 proposals for front of package labeling in the United Kingdom. One was traffic lights, red, green, yellow, with obvious designation. Green is okay, yellow is slow down, red is probably shouldn't do it very often. But the Food and Drink Federation in the United Kingdom was really upset about this idea, particularly after research showed that consumers understood traffic lights very well and didn't buy the products that had red dots. So they counter-proposed these guideline daily amounts, which are these little tokens that you see on quite a number of American food products, and they're completely incomprehensible, and that's the way the food industry likes it. The other thing that the food industry in the United States did, deliberately to head off traffic lights, was to create a unified program for front-of-package labeling. And 8 industry partners kicked in about $50,000 each. Some health organizations did too. And this was to be managed, I'm embarrassed to say, by the American Society of Nutrition, which is the largest United States organization of nutrition researchers. I'm a member. And for some reason or other, they competed, well, for the money. They competed to manage this program. It was a keystone process that went on for a couple of years. And they came up with criteria, one of which was no more than 25% of calories from added sugars. I thought that was generous. Nevertheless, I was quite surprised to find out what actually happened, because what happened was that a reporter for the New York Times, who was the new food business reporter, he had been told he ought to meet me and talk about what was going on, and I mentioned this program to him. And he said, let's go to a supermarket. And we did. And he may have been new on the beat, but he was a quick study, and he walked right over to Fruit Loops and said, is this what you're talking about? And I was shocked. I was shocked because I knew that Fruit Loops was more than 25% of calories from added sugar. It is, in fact, 44% of calories from added sugar. And how could this be? They made an exception for breakfast cereals. Sugar is the first ingredient in that. So I posted that on my website, foodpolitics.com. And a week later, I got a letter from Kellogg saying, what you did was very unfair. And I said, why? And they said, we're not making that box anymore. I said, but I bought it a week ago. And they said, well, you didn't buy the right one. We now have 3 grams of fiber in the cereal. And so I thought this, and the previous one didn't have any. And so I thought this raised an interesting philosophical question. Is a better for you product like this a good choice? And I think it's an interesting question that's well worth debating. It doesn't have an easy answer. In any case, other people thought this was ridiculous too, and the Times reporter wrote an article about it in which he quoted one of the people who was involved in development of the program as saying that Fruit Loops was better than a donut. The Economist published this photograph of this lovely child eating Fruit Loops with the caption, "It's practically spinach." And the Connecticut State Attorney General's office wrote a letter to the Smart Choices program saying that they thought they were doing something that really was misleading the public. And under this kind of ridicule and this kind of pressure, the product has been the campaign has been withdrawn. And if you go to a supermarket and see the check mark on anything, buy it quickly because it's a collector's item. Here's another collector's item. The city and county of San Francisco, looking for ways to address childhood obesity, wrote a letter to Kellogg's about this particular product, which has this big banner. This is a structure-function claim, help support your child's immunity, and said that this was misleading consumers. This product appeared during the swine flu epidemic, and if you give the matter one thought, one moment's thought and think about, well, if I feed my kid this, my kid won't get swine flu. I don't think so. In any case, this was a situation in which USA Today wrote a scathing article about it, and 2 days later, Kellogg pulled the claim, and this one is also either gone or on its way out. The food revolution at work and the power of the press at work. Now, where is the FDA in all of this? Well, I'm happy to say that the FDA is back on the job. And in the fall, the FDA announced that it was going to, as a result of the Smart Choices program, that it was going to set up a program to clarify standards for the front of food labels. It was going to do some research on how consumers interpreted front of package food labels. And the traffic light approach was very, very much in play and would be one of the approaches that they were looking at. And that work is still underway. And they're going to come out with they have an Institute of Medicine committee that's meeting on it, and they're going to come out with something this year, very, very soon, I think, trying to clarify all of that. All of this made a colleague, David Ludwig, and I encourage us to write an article, an editorial for JAMA in front of packaged food labels. It came out in February this year, where we asked the question, are these public health or propaganda? And you can pretty well guess which side we came down on that. Now, I haven't said anything up until this point about marketing to children, but I want to make a point about this because I do think that marketing to children puts this into a completely different category. It's one thing to market junk foods to adults who are supposed to have the intelligence and skills to make their own minds up about them, and to exercise personal responsibility as needed. But with kids, it's a different matter. Kids don't have very much money of their own, but food companies spend billions and billions of dollars on marketing directly to children, and they do it for 3 reasons. The first is brand loyalty. If you get a kid thinking that Coke is better than Pepsi, they'll be drinking Coke throughout life, even though blind taste tests show that nobody can tell the difference. The second is the pester factor, and you know exactly what that is. If you've got a 2-year-old or who have ever seen a 2-year-old in a supermarket, or driving down a street and looking at McDonald's. How McDonald's does that, I have no idea. But even parents who swear they have never taken their children to McDonald's or have TV in the house say their kids recognize Ronald McDonald. But that's okay. That's all marketing. The piece that bothers me most about marketing to kids is what I call kids food. That is what you want kids to do if you're a food marketer is to think that they're supposed to eat their own food. Food's made just for them. Kids foods, kid cuisine, funny shapes and sizes, cartoons on the package, unidentified food objects. And this, I think, is so subversive of parental authority or school authority about what kids eat that I think it's worth paying attention to. Now, one of the things about marketing to kids that shocks me so much is how young it starts. And I just discovered this product. Somebody wrote me about it. I ran right off to Babies R Us to go get it. It's an infant formula for toddlers, chocolate flavored, sweetened. And it's interesting because the website for Mead Johnson's a drug company. For decades, we've been dedicated to patterning our infant formulas after breast milk. This is the first I ever heard of chocolate breast milk. But I think it's a really great idea. This has health claims on it, 25 nutrients for healthy growth, DHA for brain development, antioxidants for immune system. This product is marketed to kids under the age of 2, and products aren't supposed to have health claims on them. So I'm waiting for the FDA to discover this particular one. And I think the FDA will discover it because the FDA already discovered Nestle's, no relation, Juicy Juice, a product for brain development and immunity for toddlers because it's got DHA and antioxidants added. And the FDA said, can't do that, illegal, in part because Center for Science and the Public Interest put out this absolutely remarkable report that's available on CSPI's website, in which they do a very detailed legalistic examination of a lot of these claims, and they have a whole page on Juicy Juice explaining how it violates FDA regulations. And in fact, the FDA did issue a warning letter to this product saying that it's got to clean up its act. Here's another product I picked up in a store just last week. These are graham crackers for little teeny ones, for older kids. But I thought that the banner on the front that this has calcium, iron, and zinc in it was a suggestion that these cookies are a health food. They're not a health food. They're chocolate cookies. And the best thing about them is that they're really small. And it's not just here. I mean, you have to look at what's happening in the American supermarket as part of an expression of just basic competition. But I want to say just a few words about what's happening overseas. Because there were, in February and March this year, when the quarterly reports came out, a lot of articles about how these major food companies are managing to stay afloat by promoting their products in emerging and developing markets. So Kraft profit is climbing on sales in emerging markets, and PepsiCo plans more snacks and growth in emerging markets. Now, and here's Coca-Cola doing the same thing. Coca-Cola had a very bad quarter last quarter. And the report on it in the Times said that the company has courted consumers in international markets as their economies are improving. 3/4 of Coca-Cola revenue comes from outside North America, and sales in the U.S. have been very weak as people shift to juices and teas. I'm told by people who have preteen kids that kids think that Coke and Pepsi is just so last year. And so here they are in developing and emerging markets. And a couple of weeks ago, a former medical student of mine from UCSF, Karen Sokol Gutierrez, came to my office with a slideshow and gave me permission to use her slides. She had been a Peace Corps volunteer in Ecuador in 1978 to 1980, and she wanted me to see the photographs of the smiles on these kids and how healthy their teeth were. 20 years later, she went back, and all the kids have rotted out teeth. And why do they have rotted out teeth? Well, here's this is a slide from a NYU anthropology student who's doing her anthropological research on the influx of marketing of junk foods in a remote area in Guatemala. And here's the Pepsi truck coming in to deliver Pepsi into that village. Back again in El Salvador, Dr. Sokol found this billboard saying, sugar, it only has 16 calories, and now you know, eat it because it's natural, basically. And she said every store has sugary foods. Sodas are cheaper than bottled water in these countries, and there's no public health campaign to encourage parents not to do this, except the one that she's doing that is showing a lot of success. So it's not trivial. And it raises the whole question of complicity, because when I was in Panama last year, I don't know what other people do when they visit countries. I always go to supermarkets. And I picked up this box of chocolate sweeties, which you'll be happy to know has no cholesterol, and was stunned to find out that it's got an endorsement from the Pediatric Association of Guatemala. What's that doing there? Well, you can guess what that's doing there. Now, that brings me to the whole question of complicity and alliances and partnerships, and I'm just going to give a few examples from just the last few months. Coca-Cola has given a grant to the American Academy of Family Physicians, and it's a consumer alliance program in which Coke is providing a grant for the Academy to develop consumer education content related to beverages and sweeteners for the AAFP's award-winning consumer health and wellness website, familydoctor.org. Do you think that this website will say anything about the value of kids consuming fewer sodas? Why do I think it's not going to say that? This was so shocking to members of the AAFP that in Contra Costa County, the head of the Contra Costa County Health Department organized a protest in which they burned their AAFP membership cards and are protesting and are trying to get the association to pull back on this, which it shows no sign of doing. Yale University has a particularly close and intimate relationship with Pepsi-Cola, which in December funded a new fellowship in nutritional sciences, an MD PhD program position to help support research related to nutritional science. Again, this raises questions about what this person is going to be doing research on, and you can bet that this person will not be doing research on the relationship of soft drinks to obesity. And Yale University's Office of Public Affairs put out a press announcement about that. PepsiCo is an interesting company for interesting reasons. But it's doing a tremendous amount of public relations around its obesity prevention activities. And they sent out a announcement in March this year that they're going to set an industry standard by establishing the first consistent global approach to selling beverages in schools overseas. And what they have said is they will not sell full sugar Pepsi products in schools in developing countries, although if you read the fine print on what they're actually going to do, it's a voluntary program and it's going to be done voluntarily, and they're not going to tell schools what to do. And it's not going to start for another several years. But there it is. They got a lot of publicity out of this. And then they also published full-page advertisements in a lot of American newspapers proclaiming that they've reduced beverage calories in schools by 88%. And that has come about because apparently the backlash against soft drinks in schools has been so great that sales of beverages in schools are way, way down. In fact, 88% for regular soda. So this is PepsiCo making lemonade out of lemons, I guess, or PepsiCo out of Diet Pepsi or something. So it's they're not too upset about this because only 1% of their sales are in schools, and so it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference. What they really want is to keep those vending machines in schools with the PepsiCo logo on them. Then, also on the same day that announcement was made about what Pepsi was going to be doing, the Yale University Office of Public Affairs issued a media advisory in which it announced what Pepsi was doing and said that Yale University's Kelly Brownell lauds the progressive effort of PepsiCo to not market in third world countries. And the original press release, and I'm sorry I didn't do a screenshot of it when it first came out because it had the PepsiCo logo embedded into the press release. Now, as you can imagine, Kelly Brownell took a lot of heat for this because Kelly Brownell, of course, is the person who has been writing all of these really impressive articles in the New England Journal about the public health and economic benefits to be gained if you taxed sugar-sweetened beverages. He's very, very much against kids having sugar-sweetened beverages. And when pushed to the wall on this, he said that, he was really lauding Pepsi-Cola for at least taking a step because he's been criticizing them so long for pushing Pepsi in third world countries. I don't think they're really pulling back on that very much, but it got him into a lot of trouble over that, particularly because of the lobbying efforts that have taken place just in the last year as Coke, Pepsi, and the American Beverage Association have geared up to fight soda taxes everywhere they possibly can. And this is an analysis of the amount of money that they've spent on lobbying from 2002 to 2008, and there was an enormous increase to nearly $40 million a year in lobbying costs against soda taxes. So they're fighting back. I just thought I'd throw this one in because it just came out a couple of weeks ago, where this Susan Komen for the Cure Foundation that raises money for breast cancer prevention has a partnership with Kentucky Fried Chicken, which is producing buckets of Kentucky Fried Chicken in pink buckets and some amount of money from that will go to the Susan Komen Foundation. This caused a lot of raised eyebrows. Probably the highest raised eyebrows are reserved for the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute's partnership with the Coca-Cola Company, which has a heart-healthy Coke bottle. Okay, it's Diet Coke. And they sponsor this red dress campaign every year. And this year's Center for Science and the Public Interest found out about it and had plenty to say about the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute partnering with a company that makes a sugary drink. Companies love doing this. A couple of years ago, David Ludwig and I sort of concerned about all of these things and about the social responsibility reports that are coming out from food companies, wrote an editorial in JAMA, or an opinion piece in JAMA, saying, can the food industry play a constructive role in the obesity epidemic, in which we fretted about the difference in goals of food companies and public health. The goals of the food industry are to sell more products, regardless of what those products are. The goals of public health are to get people to eat healthily, and only rarely are those goals congruent. I wish they were more congruent, but they're not. So that brings us back to the food revolution, and I love it. If the New York Times says there's a food revolution in season, it must be true. And I love showing this picture because that's me underneath it, underneath Alice Waters there. So I like that. But I do think we are in the middle of a food revolution. I teach food sociology at NYU sometimes, and the course is a course in food as a social movement. And it's not a classic social movement in the women's movement, civil rights movement, or even the ecological movement, in that it is very fragmented and very grassroots and very bottom-up, and kind of disparate in its goals, although all of the goals collectively are to create a food system that's healthier for the planet and for people. And I think the Pew Foundation commission that I was on was very much part of that, in trying to improve the way we do animal agriculture in this country, the locavore movement, the slow food movement, the organic revolution. Notice how so many of these are in revolutionary terms. They think they're part of a movement. A lot of this is being driven by climate change, which is one of the first times that I've seen the environment and the healthy food movements sort of coming together around common issues, because they're all sort of part of the same thing. Anna Lapé's new book, Diet for a Hot Planet, just out, provides all of the evidence behind the role of agriculture in climate change. And a lot of this has to do with meat production. I should say I'm not a vegetarian, but I do think we would all be a lot healthier if we ate less meat, and it would be healthier for us and for the planet, since the raising of beef is one of the largest contributors of greenhouse gases. One of the things about this movement is that some of it is quantifiable. Not a lot of it is quantifiable, but some of it is. And you can certainly count the increase in sales of organic fruits, vegetables, packaged foods even, and all the other things that are organic these days between 2000 and 2010. That's the upper left. Below that, the projected sales of organics if current trends continue. And you can count the number of farmers markets, which has gone up very, very steadily over the last 10 or 15 years. So something's happening. That's on the production side. On the consumption side, there are a lot of things happening. Again, very grassroots, sometimes city-based, sometimes county-based. We've already seen that in the attorneys' offices in some of these places. I happen to live in New York City, which has and has had for the last several years a very, very unusual combination of officials. A public health official who actually is interested in public health, and a mayor who backs him up to the hilt, and that was true of Tom Frieden and of Tom Farley. And so in 2008, we had the Trans Fat Initiative and the Calorie Labeling Initiative, which I just loved. Calorie labeling is revelatory for anybody who looks at the signs, and I was really happy to see that when President Obama signed the Healthcare Reform Act, buried on page 1206 of the draft was a codicil that mandates calorie labeling for fast food restaurants nationally. And that's going to go into effect in the next year or two, so look for it in a fast food place near you. It's coming. It'll be fun. The school food movement is another one. Schools everywhere, and I know that the Baltimore schools are very much involved in this, are trying to do something about fixing what's been going on in schools. I think it's a very important part of the movement because schools are supposed to set an example for what kids eat. And if they're letting kids have sodas and letting kids eat chicken nuggets and letting kids eat junk food, then they're saying implicitly and explicitly that this is what kids are supposed to eat. And it's normal and good. So that's was, I think, the thrust of Jamie Oliver's Food Revolution. Again, note the revolution, which are a remarkable series of programs if you haven't seen them. And if you don't have kids in schools and want to know what's going on in schools, this will show you. And everybody I know who's in schools and from my own observations say, okay, he was exaggerating, but only a little. New York City had a drink less soda initiative last year in which the advertising was trying to explain to people that if you eat a lot of sugar, you're going to put on fat. And we, of course, had a tax soda initiative that's still floating around. I don't know whether anything will come of it. I think we're seeing nationally on the right and on the left a lot of recognition that something is happening in the food system. Certainly Time magazine devotes cover after cover to issues about food, and its new top 100 list has 4 food movement figures who have been honored as some of the most influential figures, who are the most influential people in the country, among them Michael Pollan and Kathleen Merrigan, who's at the USDA. More on the left, The Nation had a special issue on food. And what I liked so much about the cover of this particular issue was that it was subtitled How to Grow Democracy, because I think that's really what the food movement is about. It's very grassroots, it's very of the people, by the people, for the people, and it's really about American democracy in its most significant forms. And we're seeing it everywhere, not only in the examples that I've given, but most recently, just last week, the Santa Clara County Supervisors. I mean, who would ever think of Santa Clara County as the bastion of American radicalism? Their supervisors banned toys with fast food meals. Everybody knows that the only reason kids want those meals is because they have toys in them. And as you can imagine, McDonald's and other places are very upset about this. I want to see this one go national. And we have a First Lady who behind the scenes is doing some really remarkable things. This wasn't exactly behind the scenes because you couldn't find the text of her speech, but she gave a speech to the Grocery Manufacturers Association of America, which is the organization that represents the makers of processed food products. And she told them, amongst many other things, that she's expecting them to rethink the products that they're making for kids, what they're telling parents and kids about those products and how those products are marketed to children. And she said, this isn't about finding creative ways to market products as healthy. And believe me, they heard what she said. What they'll do about it, I don't know. But maybe legislators and agencies and federal agencies will take notice. The White House is sending a very important signal to the country that everything having to do with food, from agriculture to public health, is important enough for the White House to recognize it and to do something about it. Whether this will get translated into real policy is something that we need to see and that we need to work toward, I think. But I think we're in a new era where change is possible and where the revolution can occur. And I'll thank you very much for that. Oh, my God. And if I have time.
I see somebody over there, Chris. I'm going to ask the first question, though. You, in your service on the commission, the Pew Commission, we had for a while, as a fellow commissioner of yours, somebody with Cargill, who ended up resigning from the commission as he saw, we think, the way in which the commissioners, the rest of you, were beginning to shape recommendations. You described yourself as not a vegetarian. You're a flexitarian, is that right?
No, I eat meat.
No, but a flexitarian eats meat occasionally.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah,
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but one of the things that struck me about this wonderful talk and the power of the food industry is that we are up against groups like Cargill, Smithfield, Mars, Kraft. How would you see, where would you begin to tease away the supports in the Farm Bill if we were to get the public health community, the nutrition community, this food revolution that you've documented? How can we help produce a better Farm Bill in 2012?
Yeah, the Farm Bill is really important, and it's so scary. It's, when I first attacked the Farm Bill, just to try to understand it, it's got a table of contents that's 17 pages long. Just the table of contents. The bill itself was 1,200 pages in its printed form. It's hopeless, absolutely hopeless for mere mortals to try to understand it. But there are groups that are working on the next Farm Bill even now. And you join those groups and try to take one little piece of it, understand its implications, and work on that one little piece, because you can't do the whole thing. I'm astounded. I cannot believe that I'm convinced that Congress passes these things because they just don't know what to do with it, and they throw their hands up and they say nobody could possibly read or understand this. It's hopeless. But there are groups that work on it. The Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy in Minneapolis is a very, very good place to start with this, because that's one of their jobs, is to track the Farm Bill. And, you have it governs absolutely everything having to do with the food system, and you pick the piece that you care about the most and get busy. I don't know how else to do it. This is grassroots democracy. You got to lobby. Join groups, lobby, make lots of noise. It's the only way.
Yeah, I'd like to know your thoughts on the increase in processed soy that's in so many foods, and the possible public health issues surrounding the increase in so many soy products, so much processed soy being used in foods.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about soy. I've got books on my shelf that say soy is the health food beyond health food. It's a superfood. I've got books on my shelf that say soy is a poison. When I see things that are so polarized like that, I think, it's just a food. That's all it is. It's food. It doesn't bother me that the ingredients are that soy ingredients are in everything. What bothers me is that they're genetically modified, and the public doesn't know that because it's not labeled. And I see that as a consumer choice issue. You don't want soy, you have no way of avoiding it because it's not labeled. But it isn't something that concerns me very much. What amuses me about soy is apparently the dairy industry has just come out with a whole new campaign to try to get the government to prevent the makers of soy products for calling their products soy milk. It also applies to almond milk or nut milks and nut butter. They don't want them called milks or butters because it's hurting dairy products. I see this as about competition for market share more than anything else.
I saw on Good Morning America this morning that the American Cancer Society has launched this huge new consumer campaign that's all about healthy choices for women, and it's sponsored by Coca-Cola. And so my reaction was kind of like the reaction of everyone in this room that I've been hearing, which is groaning. And I'm wondering if there's been any research into what kind of the non-public health and non-nutrition public thinks about these kinds of sponsorships and partnerships, and if they're even aware of them, and if they kind of shake their heads too.
For some reason or other, I want to talk about pet food, if I may. One of the chapters in our pet food book that's coming out next week is a book about the influence of pet food companies on veterinary education and practice. And as part of that, we did a survey of veterinary schools to find out how many veterinary schools had conflict of interest policies. And the answer was 0. They've never even thought that there might be a conflict of interest policy, that there might be a conflict of interest with pet food companies donating products to students and donating things and doing all the things that drug companies do or used to do in medical schools before the medical schools started cracking down on it. I think there's a huge conflict of interest. And if you ask, these deans, the deans that we talked to, whether they saw any problem, they said, no, it brings in money, we need the money. It was very simple for them. They had never considered that there might be a conflict of interest problem. And I'm astounded that the Cancer Society or that the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute would partner with Coca-Cola, because Coca-Cola is a sugary product. It's associated with obesity. Okay, the evidence isn't cut and dried, but it's certainly clear that children who habitually consume soft drinks are fatter and have worse diets than kids who don't. I mean, there's been plenty of research showing that. And okay, it's Diet Coke. All right. That's, as far as Coca-Cola is concerned, they don't care which of its products is being partnered with a federal agency. This is tremendous publicity for Coca-Cola, when the best advice that everybody could give these companies would be to eat less of them. Make Coca-Cola a once-a-month treat, or a once-a-week treat even. But what Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola have done over the years is to try to convince kids particularly that this is what they're supposed to drink all day long. Kids' food.
Over here. I can shout. No.
I don't think you're allowed to.
Concerning the KFC pink bucket, I just recently saw the commercial and I was like, oh, that's weird. And I was like, okay, maybe they're trying something. But right after that, I think it's KFC, it might have been Popeyes. I saw a commercial for a new sandwich called the Double Down.
Oh, yeah, that's KFC.
Yeah, and I was kind of confused because, like, let's help, like, cancer, like, get rid of it. But at the same time, let's make people fat. Like, it seems like there's a conflict of interest there. Like, what are they trying to do? It's like one commercial saying one thing, the other commercial saying we don't care at all.
Yeah, and the objective is to make you confused. I actually blogged about the Double Down 4 times. I couldn't believe I was doing that. As more and more unfolded about how it worked and what its calories were and what its partnerships were like. So if you can go on my blog site and read my acerbic comments about it.
Over here.
Oh, if you're holding the microphone, you've got the floor.
Okay, well, my question is two things. They're kind of related, but not quite. I wanted to know what your feeling was on genetically modified foods, and also what you thought about how Coca-Cola bought Ala Wala and Kraft bought Boca, but I think they've sold it already. I just wanted to know what your feeling was on those two things.
Well, let's deal with mergers and acquisitions first. If you want to extend your market share, you have to have lots of different choices for people, and that was why Coca-Cola bought Odwalla. You know, Odwalla was a health food company. It was a health drink company, supposedly. It was in big trouble because it had gotten into trouble because it used some dirty apples, and people who drank Odwalla juices got E. coli 015787, and some people died as a result of that. And so the company was kind of in weakened condition and was bought by Coca-Cola. So everybody made a lot of money and was very happy, and presumably Coca-Cola took over the debts, if there were any. And now they have a health drink that they can sell. I mean, that's really simple. And, you know, if you go through the supermarket and look at the health foods that you think are healthy, you want to always look and see who the parent company is. It's really interesting to find out who the parent companies are of some of these products. I mean, companies would be stupid not to buy them. Why wouldn't they? The genetically modified food issue is a complicated one, and I wrote about it extensively in my book, Safe Food, which is coming out in a new edition in June, retitled The Politics of Food Safety, which is really what it was about. And in it, I discussed the very curious vision, the conflict between the visions of genetically modified food as scientifically safe, but representing values that a lot of people really don't like. Particularly as exemplified by Monsanto, which is a corporation that has a particularly aggressive stance on selling its products. I'm concerned that 80 to 90% of the corn, soybeans, cotton, and sugar beets in the United States are genetically modified, that nobody knows about it because it's not labeled. And that I think consumers should have a choice about these kinds of things. The safety issue is probably an environmental one more than anything else, because whenever you have 80 to 90% of the food in America, one particular crop and one particular version of that crop, if something goes wrong, it goes wrong big time. And so I think it's not a sustainable way of approaching this in the future, and they're not doing very much in the third world. I wish they were. They have never brought their rhetoric in line with reality. Two more?
So I was wondering about your thoughts on the alliances in developing countries, because there is a shift. Like, we're progressing with the health claims, now companies making all sorts of health claims, and the partnerships, whether it's like donations to universities or et cetera, with the situation of them being developing countries and more in need, how do you see the public fighting this?
Well, you have to do it in the way you always fight things when you fight corporations. You join groups, you publicize, you have demonstrations, you do what you can to bring it on, but you're fighting money, which is always very difficult. If you're a food company, you want to be in universities in developing countries. You want to be doing partnerships and alliances. It doesn't cost you very much, and you gain a great deal from it. And that's true here as well as in other places.
Hi. With regard to childhood obesity, would you speak about the need for doctors going into pediatrics to be educated on food choices for children and perhaps influencing the parents through all those well-child visits about food choices for kids and the need to really educate the docs so they will speak to the parents?
Absolutely. I taught at a medical school for 10 years. I taught nutrition at a medical school for 10 years, and there was no support for nutrition education. Then there's no support for it now. I mean, nothing has changed in that way. But I think it's much more important for physicians and people who are dealing with obese kids and the families to understand what the marketing environment is like. I mean, one of the reasons why I thought the Jamie Oliver programs were so powerful was that they showed that in action. And you, as a parent, cannot fight the food system on your own. It's just too hard to do. And I talk to parents all the time who don't want to fight with their kids about food. They got plenty of things to fight with their kids about, and here they are fighting billions of dollars worth of marketing aimed directly at undermining parental authority around food issues. I think doctors need to explain that to parents and explain to them that these foods that just because it's advertised on TV doesn't mean it's healthy. I mean that, and just because it's served in schools doesn't mean it's healthy. And that's why I think the school food movement is so important, because if they're not getting it from the doctor and they're not getting it at home, at least get it in school when there's so much on there. I think it's a huge problem. Thanks very much for raising that. Is that it? Thank you very much.